Let's talk about oil prices now. They've actually turned lower today, and that's after the easing of coronavirus lockdown measures across the globe earlier lifted trader hopes for a swift recovery in demand. Brent crude futures were down 0.64% earlier at $40.54 a barrel, and US WTI futures were also down 0.58% at $37.97 a barrel after dropping $1.36 on Monday. Meanwhile, Libya's National Oil Corporation on Monday announced it has restarted production at the Al oil field with an initial output of 12,000 barrels per day and will return to full capacity of 70,000 barrels per day within 14 days. And that's just as it lifted the force majeure over crude exports from Al Sharara and Al oil fields. The NOC statement was released after OPEC Plus announced output cut decisions last Saturday. In Saudi Arabia's latest comments and Libya's production prospects are the two key issues on the front burner at the global oil market today. And we'll begin our conversations from there right away with the chief executive of the Jaconic Hydrocarbon Asset Management Consultants, Mr. Abiodun Adesanya, who joins us now to x-ray these developments. Good morning, Mr. Adesanya. Thanks for joining us on the program. So we're seeing that oil prices have been unable to sustain the tempo after the OPEC Plus agreement on further output cuts till the end of July. But does that prove the fact that the output cut agreement is just not enough to give the market the boost it requires?
I think the challenge goes a little bit more than that. The issue is, again, everything is driven by supply and demand system. So these cuts that are coming in now, which are kind of not being able to sustain the oil price that we're looking for, remains a challenge. Don't forget that the issue of production the issue of demand, has been a major problem. As of the moment, we see cargoes that are offshore looking for where to discharge and all of that. So I don't think we're there quite yet.
Now, Saudi Arabia on Monday also indicated that the kingdom and Gulf allies, Kuwait and the UAE, would not cut production voluntarily by an extra 1.18 million barrels per day in July as they are doing this month. So what implication will this have on the OPEC Plus meeting agreement?
It's going to be significant. Don't forget that the volume we're looking at Saudi Arabia and the allied Gulf countries cutting is quite significant volumes, and will have a very significant ramification in the supply system globally. Saudi Arabia is probably taking that position because they've seen other companies not strictly following the agreement that has been reached in the April meeting, and therefore they are basically saying, well, if you guys can't hold on to what has been agreed, then we are going to follow the same. So it's going to have significant implications in the supply system, and that's something that should be of a concern to all OPEC and the OPEC Plus members countries.
Would there be any particular reason why Saudi Arabia is pushing this agenda?
I guess it's to whip everybody back to line. Don't forget that it could also be counterproductive. Saudi Arabia just had an IPO out, and they are looking at being able to fully satisfy the shareholders they are hoping to capture in that IPO. And that satisfaction can only come from a reasonable and decent oil price. So to that extent, if they do a tit-for-tat approach, if they adopt that sort of approach, it's clear that it could backfire to some extent. Russia is a major producer, and they are probably one of the countries that also didn't quite follow the agreements reached. Therefore, we're going to just see a war, a supply war, so to speak. And that's not good for the oil price at all.
Well, coming off a ceasefire, in Tripoli, Libya has just also announced a resumption in production with expectations to return to full capacity of 70,000 barrels per day within 14 days. Should this actually be a source of concern, considering the objectives of OPEC, which aims to prop up prices?
70,000 barrels per day is not an awful lot of oil. I do not expect that to have significant impact on global oil prices. It can send a message, and I don't know if 70,000 is the cap they have, or perhaps it's just the starting point, and they are looking at ramping up. By the time they begin to ramp up that production from 70,000, then I think it will begin to call for some attention, yes.
Now, let's look at shale oil in the U.S., which saw a total of 1.15 million barrels per day shut down in April and May. But output is expected to return swiftly over July and August. What sort of impact will that have on oil price currently, which is hovering around $40 per barrel?
Okay, definitely that's going to create additional stress on the supply system. We're going to begin to move towards a glutting scenario of the supply, and where we have gluts, then the oil price will come down. So pure and simple, the more oil in the system, the lower the oil price. I think that's just basically the effect of what that's going to cause.
And talking about the price of oil now, Morgan Stanley yesterday commented that the current oil price rally won't last because the rally is mostly supply-driven as opposed to demand-driven. What are your own projections?
Basically, that is a very correct, a very valid statement. Again, this is supply-driven because the needs are reduced, especially during this pandemic. And as long as the pandemic remains there, we're going to have this problem. Of course, there's a gradual reopening of activities, economic and commercial activities across the globe, but it's gradual. And even at the peak of it, when we are fully opened, we're still going to have that supply system still, but that's when I hope that the oil price will begin to take its appropriate position. And that's why we've always assumed that this recovery will be very gradual.
Well, bringing things closer to us now here in Nigeria, and as part of the fallout of the OPEC Plus meeting, Nigeria and Iraq have agreed to make additional cuts. That's to compensate for the breach in May, June, between July and September. How would you expect the regulators to manage that commitment?
It's going to be, I've read that news as well, that we're going to compensate for the overproduction. But if you put that against your earlier question that Saudi Arabia had already indicated that we're not going to comply, even if you do that, that's the implication, even if you do that, then I think there's still a problem, which I believe OPEC members still have to try and have a convergence on as time goes on. The biggest challenge is the regulators over here will simply have to get all the operating and producing companies to have cuts, which they've already done. So it's not so much of the companies that are operating in Nigeria not following the rules. It's about what we are pumping out. So if we're talking about regulating that, I think from the government side, they can easily handle that. That's the Crude Oil Marketing Division of NNPC, who normally schedules the lifting for these productions.
Now, some explorationists believe that Nigeria is more of a gas nation than oil. And looking at the Ajaokuta-Kaduna-Kano project, for instance, now, how much of an economic benefit will the reality of that project bring for Nigeria?
It's going to be significant. It's going to be a major game changer, especially in the economic development and expansion in the northern part of the country. Kano, for example, as you know, is the commercial hub of the northern Nigeria, and being able to get gas there will obviously energize the factories, the industries, and overall boost the commercial activities from there. And I'm pretty sure that there will be other derivatives of that, expansion of that or fallout of that into the other parts of that region. The gas is going to come from Ajaokuta, which means that the Oben-Ajaokuta gas pipeline needs to be expanded, and then more gas needs to be pushed up into that line so that they can cater for what is being needed at the moment and what is going to be needed in future. But also, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that oil and gas exploration activity is going on in the northern part of the country, and that could provide, is still in its very early stages of exploration right now, and that would definitely provide additional support if and when that gas becomes fully developed, when the resources there becomes fully developed and being produced. But definitely this will be a very positive, will have very positive impact on the economy, especially of the northern Nigeria and Nigeria in the whole.
Just before I let you go, Mr. Adesanya, I remember from our last conversation that, of course, players were battling with the issue of moratorium on their debt obligations. Has anything changed in this regard?
I'm not aware anything has changed, but let me clarify a little bit what I discussed at that interview then. The industry, is very familiar with and very used to oil price, fluctuating up and down. And we generally have contingent plans to take care of that scenario of lower oil price should it come. So it's nothing new to us. And when I say contingency plan, that includes meeting obligations as much as possible and all of that. So I can tell you for sure that there are some companies that are operating and still, despite the challenges we have, making significant effort to fulfill their obligations to the lenders that gave them facilities at the beginning. Some companies have been able to manage, when you have a surplus, you're able to save, and when you have little, you're able to deploy. So they've adopted that approach, and that seems to be working even through this period that we're talking about right now. So, but overall, I know that CBN hasn't moved, and I know that I'm not aware of any discussions that has taken place with the lenders, between the lenders and the borrowers, in terms of being able to arrive at some sort of moratorium or something that will cushion the effect of the current challenges they're having with loan repayment.
Chief Executive Officer of the Draconic Hydrocarbon Asset Management Consultants, Mr. Abiodun Adesanya, thanks for speaking with us on Business Morning.
Thanks for having me.